Hey guys, hi to all. Today we are going to read our chapter 8 from your another book Vistas. And before you read, there is something for you that you have to read. This unit presents autobiographical episode from the lives of two women from marginalized communities. Marginalized community means those who are deprived of uh, some opportunities like education, uh, government introduced schemes due to their race, their gender, their ability. So, who took back on their childhood and reflect on their relationship with the mainstream culture. The first account is by American Indian woman born in the late 19th century. The second is by a contemporary Dalit writer. So, first uh, woman name is Gertrude Simmons Bonin, and she was extraordinarily talented and educated and Native American woman who struggled and triumphed in a time when severe prejudice prevailed toward Native American culture and women. As a writer, she adopted pen name Zitkala-sa, and in 1900 began publishing articles criticizing the Carly Indian school. Her work criticized dogma, and her life as a Native American woman was dedicated against the evils of oppression. Vama is the pen name of a Tamil Dalit woman from a Roman Catholic family, and she has published three main works: an autobiography, Karakku, a novel, Sangati, and a collection of short stories. And the following excerpt has been taken from Karakku, means the second one about Vama. Then it just means that freshness or newness. So here in the story we will be reading about two women from different community, but yes, the same thing is about their marginalized community and their relationship with the mainstream culture. So the first account of American Indian woman, we will be reading about her in this excerpt, and she will be telling about her own story in her own way, that how her long braids or how her long hair had been cut by the school authorities because they just wanted that everyone should look like American, not Indian. So, for that harsh reality, she had to cut her long hair. And then we will be reading about the second character from another story, that we too are human being. It's the text, it's narrated by Bama, and she will be telling us about that, how she got to know about untouchability and what she did. We will be reading in this chapter. So the very first thing is the cutting of my long hair by Zitkala-sa. The first day in the land of apples was a bitter cold one, for the snow still covered the ground and trees were bare. Land of apple mean the area where apples are grown in abundance. Land of apple mean place that has some restriction. We can use it in that way also. Bare means without snow. So here the author or Zitkala-sa, she says that it's the place, one can call it boarding school, and there are so many restrictions. She felt very cold because there was snow on the ground, as we have already read in this paragraph, and snow on trees had melted. So she had some bitter experience on the very first day. She will be telling us more about it. I will be taking it in chunks so that I can make you clear कि हर पैराग्राफ के बाद क्या हो रहा है. मैं कुछ लाइन्स लूँगी और उनको एक्सप्लेन करूँगी और न्यू वर्ड्स भी बताते जाऊँगी जो भी बीच में आएंगे. A large bell rang for breakfast, and its loud metallic voice crashing through the belfry overhead and into our sensitive ears. Belfry is a new word for you, and it means that place where bell is installed or a part of a long tower which has a bell. Sensitive means which is easily affected. So she is telling here a large bell was there which started ringing, and it was installed on the upper floor. Its loud voice of metal came from the place where bell was installed, and the sound was very loud for small baby's soft ears. Like she is also very small, so she is saying that her soft ears. The annoying clatter of shoes on bare floors gave us no peace. Clatter means sound of something, or she is telling us clatter of shoes. It means that sound of shoes on bare floor, which is striking against each other. So bare floor means the floor which may not be having carpets or mats. So there was sound of footstep on the floor because many students they were walking as the bell has rung. The floor did not have carpet, so the sound was very clear, very loud, and it was a disturbing sound. So it's a new place for Zitkala-sa where she was sent by her parents just to stay and to study. Next line is the constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue. The word undercurrent means in the background, invisible in the air, which is flowing. The constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue made a bedlam within which I was securely tied, and though my spirit tore itself in struggling for its lost freedom, all was useless. So here the word undercurrent I have already told you, in the background, or which we can say whose flow is in air is invisible. Unknown tongue means unknown language. Bedlams mean confusion, disturbance, like मेंटल हॉस्पिटल की तरह जो शोर होता है और उसकी वजह से जो डिस्टर्बेंस क्रिएट होती है. Murmuring means whispering or low voices. My spirit tore itself means I tried my best to do something to free myself to get the freedom I already had. So here she is explaining that so many harsh voices were being spoken together, and in the background, many people, many students were speaking a language which was not known to me. So, me, I just said just because for the class only, I could not move away from confusion and disturbance which was created by the voices, and she tried her best to regain her lost freedom, but the struggle she was doing was all useless. So, in the next paragraph, she is telling us about a pale faced woman with white hair came up after us. Pale face means white woman, or the one who has yellow color just because of weakness. So we were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. So stiff shoes means hard shoes, closely clinging dresses means very tight fitting clothes. So here she is saying that a white woman who had white hair was also walking behind them, and they were to make a line, a queue to the dining room, and all the girls, which were Indian girls, their shoes were very hard and they were wearing very tight fitting clothes. The small girls wore sleeved apron and shingled hair. Shingle means boy cut, short hair, very short hair. As I walked noiselessly in my soft moccasins, moccasin means shoes with soft sole which don't make noise, I felt like sinking to the floor. Sinking to the floor mean feel ashamed, for my blanket had been stripped from my shoulders. Blanket here we can say dupatta, scarf, whatever shawl she is carrying. Stripped means removed. In this paragraph, she is telling us that small girls they were wearing an apron which had long sleeve means full sleeve they were. Their hair were cut in the style of boy cutting we can say, like as a boy's hair. Jiklasa was wearing her moccasins and her steps were not making any noise, and she was feeling ashamed because her scarf was removed from her shoulders. I looked hard at the Indian girls who seemed not to care that they were even more immodestly dressed than I. In the tightly fitting clothes, while we marched in, the boys entered at an opposite door. Here we got the word immodest means indecent. मतलब जिसमें शर्म नाम की चीज़ ना हो. So here the explanation, she is telling us that she stared at the Indian girls and they were not even bothered about their tight fitting clothes and they looked very indecent than Jiklasa's dress. While we marched into the dining room, the boys came from the opposite side door. So I watched for the three young braves who came in our party. I spied them in a rear rank, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. A small bell was tapped, and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. Young braves we got here. Young braves means young boys. Rear rank means back rows. Drew means pulled. So here she is telling us that she looked at the three young boys who also joined them in the dining room and they were standing in the back rows. So she tried to look at them secretly. Spied means secretly noticing something, and noticed that they were also equally uncomfortable like Jiklasa. A bell was tapped and each pupil pulled a chair from under the table. Means the first bell which rang means that everybody has to drew their chair from the table. Supposing this act meant they were to be seated, I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated and all the rest are at our table remained standing. So she just supposed or imagined that everyone is pulling their chair. Chairs means that everybody would be sitting in the next time. So she also pulled her chair and immediately sat on it. But when she looked around, she noticed that she was the only person in the hall, in the dining room, who was sitting, and everybody else at her table they were standing. So the next line is just as I began to rise, looking shyly around to see how chairs were to be used, a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last, and I had to crawl back into my chair again. Shyly means now she is nervous, so we can say that it's an adverb nervously. Crawl means move slowly. So she started getting up from the chair and nervously looked at the others. She got it that how chairs were to be used. Then a second bell rang, and now it was the bell which is telling that everybody will be sitting on their own chairs. Slowly, I slowly she tried to get back into her chair again and sat. Then I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall and I looked around to see him, but all the other hung their heads over their plates. So now she's telling us she heard a voice of a man. He was standing at one end of the hall and she turned to look at him, but all other pupil means student, bent their head to their plates. It means that might be they are praying. And then she says, as I glanced at the long chain of table, I caught the eye of a pale faced woman upon me. Immediately I dropped my eyes, wondering why I was so keenly watched by the strange woman. Glanced here means is looked, caught the eyes means made an eye contact, dropped my eyes means looked down or looked away. Wondering means not understanding, keenly means carefully. So here she is telling that when I looked around, I observed that there were many rows of tables and they were making a chain. And when an eye contact was made with the white woman or the pale faced lady, immediately she tried to look down or looked away from her eyes. And she did not understand why an unknown woman was so carefully watching her. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell was tapped. Everyone picked up his knife and fork and began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more. Here we got mutterings means whispers or the words which are not understood. Venture here means to understand, to take risk. So she is telling us that the man who was saying something or whispering something, he stopped, and a third bell was also ringed. We can say sounded. Everybody picked up their knife and fork and started eating, but Jiklasa was the only one who was crying instead of eating, because now she did not want to understand anything more here or didn't want to take any risk further. By this, eating by formula was not the hardest trial in the first day. Late in the morning, my friend Judevin gave me a terrible warning. Judevin knew a few words of English and she had overheard the pale faced woman talk about cutting our long, heavy hair. So, overhear means to hear without knowledge of the speaker. When we overhear means when we get the conversation of someone when they are not watching us. But these rules of eating, whatever she has told us in the paragraph I am explaining, now she is telling that the eating by formula, this is the very important thing. You might be asked in the final examination about it. So this you have to make sure that you are getting it clearly. This is a very important line. You must underline it. Okay. So here we are, like she is telling us the eating by formula. She was not aware how to take fork and how to handle the knife and cut and eat the food. So these rules of eating were the very toughest thing to happen on the very first day of the school. Before the noon time in the same morning, her friend told her about the horrible information we talked about. Judevin knew some words of English as we got from the paragraph, and she had heard the white woman talking about cutting off their long, heavy hair. Our mother had taught us that only unskilled warriors who were captured had their hair shingled by the enemy. Among our people, short hair was worn by the mourners and shingled hair by the cowards. Here we got the word captured means जब किसी को कोई पकड़ लेता है, and shingle means boy cutting like hair या फिर short hair, very short hair we can say. Mourners means at the time of funeral, and coward means that poke, not having uh, great courage. One more word, unskilled means untrained warriors. So we are getting from this paragraph that they had been taught from their mothers that sometime an enemy, when they capture an unskilled or coward soldiers, their hair would trim. And in the community of Zitkala-sa and Jurevin, hair were cut very short when somebody died in their family, and only coward had their hair trimmed or short. So we discussed our fate some moments, and when Judevin said we have to submit because they are strong, I rebelled. No, I will not submit, I will struggle first, I answered. Fate means destiny or luck. Rebel means revolt karna, oppose karna. Struggle means to make effort. The two friends Jiklasa and Jurevin, they talked about their destiny for some time, for their fate for some time, and then Jurevin said that they will have to accept their orders because those people are powerful. I decided to oppose, and I said that I would not accept. She said that she would not accept this thing, and at the very first time, she will make an effort not to accept this thing that they are going to cut their hair and she will be accepting. It's impossible type. So, next is in the paragraph, she is telling, I watched my chance, and when no one noticed, I disappeared. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could in my squeaking shoes. My moccasins had been exchanged for shoes. Chance, the word here, means opportunity, you all are aware. Squeak means to make a shrill voice. So here, Jiklasa is telling us that she waited for an opportunity, and when nobody was looking at her, she tried to hide herself. And her moccasin, they were already taken away, and she had been given shoes to wear, and these shoes made sound while she walked. She silently walked up the staircase as silently as she could. So, next is along the hall, I passed without knowing whither I was going. Whither, the word here is, the meaning of the word is where. Turning aside to an open door, I found a large room with three white beds in it. Turn aside to means move toward. Then she crossed the hall and she tried to know where she was going. And she moved toward a door in the hall. Through this door, she entered into a large room, and that room already had three beds in it. The windows were covered with dark green curtain, which made the room very dim. Thankful that no one was there, I directed my steps toward the corner furthest from the door. The word we got here is dim, means when light is less in a room. Furthest means there is the greatest distance between the room and the hall. Now she's explaining in this paragraph that the curtain which were used in that room, they were of green color, dark green color, and so this room was not having enough light. So she felt happy that no one was there in the room, and she moved to the corner which had greatest distance from the door. On my hand and knees I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. From my hiding place I peered out, shuddering with fear whenever I heard footsteps nearby. Huddle means lie with hand and leg close to the body. Peer means बाहर को देखना, stare करना. Shuddering means trembling or shivering. So now she's trying to crawl on her hands and knees and went under the bed. She put both her hands and legs close to her body and lay under the bed. From there, she was staring or she was peeping outside, and she tried to start trembling because of fear when sound of footsteps were close to her. Though in the hall loud voices were calling my name, and I knew that even Jurevin was searching for me, I did not open my mouth to answer. Now she is telling us about that. बहुत सारे लोग जो थे वो हॉल में उसका नाम ले रहे थे ज़ोर ज़ोर से, लेकिन जुड़ेविन जो थी वो भी नहीं जानती थी कि मैं कहाँ पे हूँ, इसलिए वो भी सर्च कर रही होगी। लेकिन इसके बाद भी उसने अपना मुंह जो है वो आंसर देने के लिए नहीं खोला कि मैं कहाँ पे हूँ। Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. The sound came nearer and nearer. Women and girls entered the room. और कुछ टाइम के बाद ऐसा होता है कि कुछ लोग जो हैं वो जल्दी जल्दी में उसी साइड आना शुरू हो जाते हैं, यहाँ पे जिक्लासा बेड के नीचे जिस रूम में अपने आप को छुपाए हुए हैं. So the voices, they were very anxious, they were very clear now that they are coming nearer to Jiklasa. The sound of steps and the people started coming nearer to Jiklasa. So many women and girls entered the room where Jiklasa was hiding. I held my breath and watched them open closet doors and peep behind large trunks. Someone threw up the curtain and room was filled with sudden light. As we have already discussed that इस रूम के बीच में कर्टन जो थे वो डार्क ग्रीन कलर के थे, इसलिए वहाँ पे कुछ भी इतना ज़्यादा विजिबल नहीं था डिम लाइट की वजह से। बट अभी किसी ने यहाँ पे आके ऐसा किया है कि एकदम से कर्टन्स जो हैं उनको फेंक दिया है, तो सारा का सारा रूम जो है वो एकदम से सडन लाइट जो है उसमें आ गई है। सो शी इज़ ट्राइंग टू हेल्ड हर ब्रेथ, मतलब जैसे सांस रोक लेते हैं उस तरीके से। और उसने जो है वो बाहर देख रही है। ट्रंक मीन्स बॉक्सेस पड़े हैं उस रूम में, क्लोजेट मीन्स अलमीरा है वहाँ पे। तो वो बाहर देख रही है कि कोई आता है या फिर क्या होता है। तो शी इज़ स्केर्ड एनफ, शी इज़ shuddering with fear. What caused them to stoop? Here we are. So she is telling that what caused them to stoop and look under the bed, I do not know. I remember being dragged out, though I resisted by kicking and scratching wildly. Stoop का मतलब होता है नीचे झुक जाना और wildly का मतलब है vigorously, और स्क्रैच करने का मतलब है जैसे नाखून के साथ निशान जो है, स्क्रैच मतलब स्किन के ऊपर उसने नाखून से निशान जो है वो उनको लगा दिए। वाइडली मीन्स जैसे विग्रसली, गुस्से के साथ। सो हेयर शी इज़ ट्राइंग टू टेल अस दैट कि वो उनमें से कोई झुका और उसने बेड के नीचे देखा। वो नहीं जानती कि ऐसा उसको कैसा फील हुआ कि कोई यहाँ पे है। और जिक्लासा को वहाँ से खींच लिया गया। उसने बहुत रेजिस्ट किया जब वो उसको खींच रहे थे, लेकिन उसने उनको किक भी किया और उसके साथ उन्होंने उसको उस जिक्लासा ने उनको स्क्रैच भी किया। लेकिन आगे वो कहती है, इन स्पाइट ऑफ माई सेल्फ आई वॉज कैरिड डाउन स्टेयर एंड टाइड फास्ट इन अ चेयर। इन स्पाइट ऑफ माई सेल्फ का मतलब है उसकी विशेष के अगेंस्ट। डाउन स्टेयर मतलब नीचे वाला फ्लोर या फिर सीढ़ियाँ जो नीचे की तरफ जाती हैं। टाइट फास्ट मीन्स टाइटली बांधना किसी को। तो उसकी विश के अकॉर्डिंग तो कुछ भी नहीं हुआ। शी वॉज कैरिड अवे टू द लोअर फ्लोर एंड शी वॉज tightly tied in a chair. Here, I cried aloud, shaking my head all the while until I felt the cold blades of scissors against my neck and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids. Then I lost my spirit. Gnaw off का मतलब होता है cut slowly, cut off। और जी यहाँ पे नौ वाले वर्ड में साइलेंट रहता है, इसको हम नौ ही पढ़ते हैं। स्पिरिट मीन्स करेज। I cried loudly. I was shaking my head while crying. Then I felt blades of scissors on back of neck. And then I stopped crying. I heard the sound of scissors and it had slowly cut one of my braids. And then I lost my courage. Means I lost each and everything in me. Since the day I was taken from my mother, I had suffered extreme indignities. Indignities का मतलब होता है insult होना, humiliation feel करना. People had stared at me. I had been tossed about in the air like a... So in this paragraph she is telling us that I had suffered extreme insult since I moved away from my mother. People started staring at me, meaning they had scolded her. People gave her orders without considering my wishes, my desires, meaning others were ordering that what to do, how to behave. And now my long hair was shingled, means cut like a coward's, and in my anguish I mourned for my mother, but no one came to comfort me. Anguish means torture, sadness, dukh. Mourned means called in a low, painful voice. Comfort means to console, to support. And she is saying that Now her hair were also very trimmed, just like that of a coward, and in my sadness I slowly called my mother, but no one came to support me. And last but not the least, not a soul reasoned quietly with me as my own mother used to do, for now I was only one of many animals driven by a herder. Not a soul means nobody, reasoned quietly means talked peacefully, herder means one who keeps animal. So she is explaining here, my mother used to talk to me peacefully. Only my mother used to talk to me in this fashion. So here nobody came near to me to talk to me without shouting at me, because I was considered one of many small animals and the herder used to order. So this is all about part 1, the cutting of my long hair by Zitkala-sa. Second part I will be uploading soon, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow. So guys, please watch and learn from this excerpt what uh, Jiklasa has felt about herself and her life, and she was so determined, as we got from this story all about her. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please subscribe and let your friends subscribe it too. We will be soon 1K family. Thank you so much for your support and love.